in the heart, right here. Now, your nervous system picks up the information in this center. The integrating center could be anywhere in the central nervous system. Okay, we'll look at the specifics. Anywhere in the central nervous system, which we're not looking at. Now, the central nervous system processes that information and sends back that information to the muscles of the heart. So you have a two-chain system, okay? You have the sensory fiber. This one goes to the effect to the central nervous system. And then the integrating system sends information now to say, okay, you know what? Increase your heart rate. Okay? So these effectors, the receptors will say, you know what? We're getting very little blood here. We're getting very little blood, and we think there's a problem. So that information goes to the central nervous system. The central nervous system interprets that information and sends back the information to the effector, which is the muscles of the heart at this point, and different other components of the heart, to say, you know what, can you increase in the intensity of your squeezing and the rate at which you are pumping, okay? Because we've received information from the receptor saying you're not getting enough blood. So it needs to go like this and come back. So it's a chain for it to act, all right? So this is how the brain normally functions. This is generalized, whether autonomic nervous system, somatic, whatever, this is how the nervous system works, all right? So now what we're saying is that all the bodies, all the organs in the body, or the internal organs, have both the sympathetic innervation and the parasympathetic innervation. And these, on every organ, they are contradictory of each other. Okay? That's what we are saying. So now, let's look at the afferents. Now, the afferents mostly for the parasympathetics and sympathetics. So they will go through the spinal cord. Okay? They'll go through the spinal cord. Now, let me just draw something here. So your spinal cord, this is your spinal cord. That's a C-section of the spinal cord. This marker is not very clear. Can I use another one? Okay. Okay, so this is a cross-section of your spinal cord, right? Now, this is the gray matter. So you have the gray matter there. I hope you're seeing. And then this is the white matter. All right. Then you have your central canal. So the central canal has CSF, has fluid, CSF. Then you have the dorsal root. The dorsal root there. So this side and that side are the same. So this is the dorsal root and this is the dorsal root as well. And then you have the ventral root, all right? So the ventral root, dorsal root, gray matter, white matter, central canal, right? So this is the back, this is the front, all right? Then you have what is called, this thickening here is called the dorsal root ganglion. So a ganglion is just a collection of cell bodies outside the central nervous system. most cell bodies are in the central nervous system, that is the spinal cord and the CNS. So when there's a constellation of cell bodies outside the spinal cord and the brain, that constellation of cell bodies is called a ganglia. It forms a ganglia. So you have a lot of ganglia in the body, okay? So one of the ganglia is called the dorsal root ganglia, which is very close to the spinal cord. Now, I hope we're together at this point. I'm not seeing. Okay, I hope we are. So if you have a question, just type it and I'll see, because I'm seeing the chat, and then I can read it out and answer it for now. Okay, so this is the spinal cord and how, you know, things are happening with it. Now, to get an input into the central nervous system, information comes from the receptor here. So let's say you have the stomach there, all right? This is the stomach. So for the information to go from the stomach to the integrating centers and back, it needs to be picked up from the receptors there. It goes in. Normally, this is an apparent neuron. It has its cell body in the dorsal root ganglion. So this is the cell body, and it continues inside the integrating centers. Now, what happens in the integrating center depends on which part of the nervous system we're talking about. All right. Now, for the sake of this lecture and this tutorial, let's just assume, for simplicity's sake, that the integrating center is here in the gray matter, right? In the gray matter. So what will happen is that once the integration happens, it's happening here. Okay, the information should come out from this integrating center using another neuron. Okay, so remember this one is going like this, using another neuron to come back here and go back to the stomach and give information that this should happen. The stomach should either continue churning or relax or whatever. Okay, so that's how it should. So there should be a two-way system from the organ to the integrating center and back to the organ. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. Now, the sensory part of the parasympathetics and the sympathetics, they all go through the dorsal root ganglion. They follow the normal channel. They all go through the dorsal root ganglion. No differences there. The differences then, therefore, come through when it comes to the information that moves from the integrating center to the organ. Now, the way the autonomic nervous system is made in such a way that the motor neuron, so the one which comes from the organ to the integrating center is the sensory neuron. The one which comes from the integrating center to the organ is called the motor neuron, which is going to the effector organ. It's called the motor neuron. Now, for the autonomic nervous system, the motor neuron is a two-way pathway. Okay, so you have two neurons. You have one neuron for the sensory, but you have two neurons for the motor aspect, because it the integrated the central nervous system. Now, the difference comes in when we're talking about the motor aspect, because these guys, they have to go through the ganglion. So they go through the ganglion. Now, that is both for the sympathetics and the parasympathetics. They go through the ganglion. Okay. Now, so this is what happens. When the information comes out from the integrating centers, depending on which organ we're talking about and which system, whether sympathetic or parasympathetic, there will be a ganglion here. Like I said, a ganglion is a collection of cell bodies outside the central nervous system. So any collection of cell bodies outside the central nervous system is called a ganglion. So I have a lot of ganglions. So now there are ganglions specific for the parasympathetics, ganglion specific for the sympathetics. And these ganglions are littered up and around the system. All right. Now, what happens now is for both parasympathetic and sympathetic, neuron number 1, which is moving from the integrating center to the ganglion, is called preganglionic neuron. Okay? It will go here. Its cell body is in the integrating center. That's its cell body. All right? The cell body of this neuron is in the integrating center. The cell body for the sensory neuron, the one I drew up here, is in the dorsal root ganglion. You need to know that information. The cell body of the sensory aspect of the parasympathetic and sympathetic is in the dorsal root ganglion. The cell bodies for the preganglionic, which is the motor aspect of the parasympathetic or sympathetics, are in the integrating centers, which can be different. Okay? Integrating centers. So that's where the cell body is, because it gets a relay from the inputs. So this nerve, which is the preganglionic, it's preganglionic because it does not yet reach the ganglion. It's preganglionic. So it comes to the ganglion and relays here information in the ganglion. So this is the ganglion. Okay? The ganglion here. Now, okay, so this is the ganglion, right? Now, from the ganglion to go to the effector organ, the organ of interest this time, there should be another neuron, which has a cell body in the ganglion. So it gets the input here. This other one relays input here. It gets this input to the effector organ. Okay? Now, its cell body, this is number 1, this is number 2. Now, neuron number 1 is preganglionic because it's going to the ganglia. And then from the ganglia, it relays information to the effector organ through another neuron, this time called neuron number 2, otherwise known as the postganglionic neuron. Okay? This is for both sympathetics and parasympathetics. Now, for the sympathetics, like we discussed last time, we said the sympathetic trunk, okay, sympathetic part of the body, mostly, is thoracolumbar. Sorry. Hello? Good about. Oh, Mama, can you call me later? I'm in a class, eh? Thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, so where were we? So we're saying, like last time we discussed, we said the sympathetic trunk, which is next to the vertebra, all right, runs as a thoracolumbar chain from T1 up to T12, and then it goes and runs up to L2. So that is where the sympathetic trunk is, and it's very close to the vertebra. Okay, it's very close to the vertebra. Now, even the ganglion for the sympathetics are very close to the vertebra. Now, because the ganglions are very close to the vertebra, the preganglionic neuron for the sympathetics is going to be short because the ganglions are close to the vertebra. But the effector organs are very far. So what you notice is that the preganglionic neurons for the sympathetic specifically are going to be short, but the postganglionic neurons are going to be long, okay? Because they have to take a longer course from the prevertebral ganglion to the effector organs. The situation changes when we're talking about the parasympathetics, okay? For the parasympathetics, which is craniosacral, okay, the sacral part and the cranial aspect, that's where the sympathetics chain is. The ganglion are very close to the effector organ, okay? Now, because the ganglions are very close to the effector organ, what is going to be longer is going to be the preganglionic neuron. And what is going to be shorter is the postganglionic neuron. So that's what happens for these two. Okay? Now, most preganglionic neurons are myelinated. For a myelinated neuron, the information moves fast. For an unmyelinated neuron, the information lags a bit. Okay, because it doesn't jump. Obviously, you did this in physiology, the run here and whatever, so it jumps. but the pre-ganglionic neurons are myelinated. That's for both sympathetics and parasympathetics. They are myelinated. Then the post-ganglionic neurons are not myelinated, so they are unmyelinated. Now, the nervous system uses neurotransmitters to communicate information. The neurotransmitter that is used in the sympathetics, okay, for the pre-ganglionic. Doctor, please repeat on the length of the pre and post-ganglionic neurons. Okay, right. Okay, I said, let me just see the chart. So what the appeal is asking, please, doctor, repeat on the length of the pre and post-ganglionic neurons. Great. So I said, for the sympathetics, the ganglia is very close to the integrating center, which, like I said, the integrating center is the central nervous system consisting of the spinal cord and the brain. So the ganglia for the sympathetic nervous system is very close to the sympathetic to the integrating centers. So what that means is that the pre-ganglionic, so this is the ganglia. Let's assume that we're talking about the sympathetics. So this ganglia for the sympathetics is very close to the integrating center. So what will happen is that the pre-ganglionic neuron is going to be short because the ganglia is very near the integrating center. However, the effector organ is going to be very far from the ganglia. So you find that the pre-ganglionic neurons for the sympathetics are going to be short because the ganglia itself is very close to the integrating center. But the post-ganglionic neurons are going to be longer because the distance between the ganglia and the effector organ is quite significant. It's much more than the distance between the integrating center and the ganglia for the sympathetics. The reverse is true for the parasympathetics. The ganglia is very close. Some ganglia are even within the effector system, like for the stomach. The ganglia, you find that they are within the effector system. So you find that the pre-ganglionic neuron for the sympathetics, for the parasympathetics, are going to be longer than the post-ganglionic neurons for the parasympathetics. So that's what I was saying. I hope at this point we can understand. Now I've lost my thoughts. Where was I? I was talking about neurotransmitters. Oh, waiting room. Just a minute, I have to admit some people. Well, I can't see anyone coming in, so, okay, great. Musonda. Okay, right, so. Right, so what I was saying is that the nervous system uses neurotransmitters. Now, for the sympathetics, the neurotransmitters on the motor aspect, so you have two pathways. So you have the pre-ganglionic for the sympathetics, and you have the post-ganglionic. Also, for the parasympathetics, the para, you will have the pre-ganglionic and the post-ganglionic neuron, right? We're together at this point. The post-ganglionic neurons for the parasympathetics, we use acetylcholine. No, sorry. These we use noradrenaline. They will use noradrenaline. Then the pre-ganglionic use acetylcholine. Okay? The only caveat for the post-ganglionic is for the sympathetics that go to the saliva glands, which might use acetylcholine. But all other post-ganglionic sympathetics use noradrenaline. Okay? Which is like adrenaline. It's the same class as adrenaline. So it's the same class as adrenaline. Now, for the sympathetics, all of them use acetylcholine. Pre- and post-ganglionic neurons for the parasympathetics use acetylcholine. The preganglionic neurons of the sympathetics use acetylcholine. The post-ganglionic neurons of the sympathetics use noradrenaline. And this noradrenaline, sorry. Okay, so Judith is asking that I should go through this. So we say the nervous system information is transferred through neurotransmitters. All right, so that's what happens. Neurotransmitters. We have the sympathetics and parasympathetics, and we're talking about the motor aspect, which has two neuron pathways: the pre-ganglionic and post-ganglionic. Pre-ganglionic from integrating center to the ganglion, and post-ganglionic from the ganglion to the effector organ. Okay? Now, for the sympathetic pre-ganglionic neuron, it uses acetylcholine. However, the sympathetic post-ganglionic neuron uses noradrenaline, which is in the same class as adrenaline. And that's why for the sympathetics, you know, adrenaline, you get excited. That's what happens. So adrenaline has to come in and push you up. Okay? Now, for the parasympathetics, the pre-ganglionic and post-ganglionic both use acetylcholine. Now, like I said, the only caveat for the sympathetics is on the post-ganglionic fibers that go to the salivary glands that will have acetylcholine. If you are Shala fiancé, it's noradrenaline. I hope we're together at this point. So your handout has all this information. All right. So you just go through your handout and you try and understand it better. So I had issues because I thought you needed a bit of an explanation like this one for you to understand a few of these, these issues. But I hope it helps a bit. Now let's move up. That's something I haven't talked about. The handout. I think most of the staff have talked about it. If there's something I haven't talked about, homework, it's there in your handout and you read it up. But I think this suffices. You'll be able to understand when you go through your handout. It would be nice to go through it today after this lecture so that you are able to understand it better instead of going through it tomorrow. Now, let's talk about the effects of the sympathetics and parasympathetics. Then, this lecture yapo. Head to toe. The eye, the heart, the lungs. Maybe let's talk about systems. Seeing a question here. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Sweat glands, not saliva. No. What did the handout say? Are you sure? It's supposed to be salivary glands. Supposed to be salivary glands. I'll confirm that and then I'll give you feedback. I'll give you feedback. All right. So, okay, I don't know if I got you well, so I'm lost. So for the sensory part, you said it goes through the dorsal ganglion And when you started talking about the motor aspect, that is where the preganglionic neuron. Yeah, so the sensory aspect is just the one neuron into the integrating center. So you don't have, there's no preganglionic. So remember, the dorsal root ganglion for the, let me just redraw what I drew so that you can see how it went. So this was your spinal cord, all right? This was the spinal cord. Yeah. Okay, I hope you're seeing, but it's okay. You are the dorsal ganglion here. Okay, we're moving like this. I hope you are seeing. Then I said the sensory one was coming from the effector organ, coming through here, giving a cell body there, and going through the integrating center. So you see, it's one neuron coming here from the receptor. A neuron needs to have a cell body. That's what you need to know. So a neuron needs to have a cell body somewhere. So this neuron, it's like this is the cell body, and then it has two arms. So one is coming from the effector, comes here in the dorsal root ganglion. That's where the cell body is. It's like an octopus. And then the other one goes to the integrating center. So two neurons. Unlike the motor one, the motor has two, which are divided. There's a ganglion, so comes, ends at the ganglion. Another one picks from the ganglion to the effector organ. So one from the integrating center ends at the ganglion. The other one takes, it's like a relay, okay? You have Gerard Siame from the integrating center, stops at the dorsal ganglion, and then Gerard Piri picks it up from the dorsal ganglion to the end, relay yapo. Now, for the sensory one, it's like an octopus. It decided to be on the middle. I'll just be alone. So I pick information alone, bring it up in the ganglion, I'm still myself, and take it to the integrating center. Okay? So the sensory neuron is one neuron, but for the motor aspect are two neurons. I don't know if you've gotten Fegi Mwanja. I don't know if that's okay, that explanation. So you can only talk about the preganglionic and the postganglionic when it comes to the motor aspect, because that's where you have two neurons. You can't talk about the pre and post when you're talking about the sensory aspect, because you only have one octopus-like neuron. All right, good. So we go back. I'm not saying any questions, so I'll assume everything is good at this point. Yeah. One person waiting in the room. Aaron. Okay. All right, thank you. So we're talking about the eye. We talk about the heart. We talk about the lungs. We talk about the skin. We talk about the digestive system. Or let's just band this into the abdomen. The abdomen, and then you have the genital urinary system. So what you do, you go through the handout, it will have the meat and put the meat together. I'm going to give you a skeleton of how this thing is working. Okay, I'll try. Okay. So for the eye, the sympathetics dilates your pupil. Okay, it wants to let in, you want to see better. Okay, so it dilates your pupil. So the sympathetics dilates your pupil. That's what it does. Okay. If you have a question, just type it. I'm trying to mute everybody. Okay. So the sympathetics would dilate your pupil, right? And then the parasympathetics will do opposite. They'll constrict your pupil. Okay? So it's like when you have light. When you shine a light to your pupil, the same effect that the light has to your pupil is the same effect that the parasympathetics will have. They will dilate. Sorry, it's the opposite. Don't follow that one. Don't follow that one. Sorry, I confused myself. So all I'm saying is that the sympathetics will dilate your pupil, the parasympathetics will constrict your pupil. So that's what will happen. When it comes to the heart, so the sympathetics comes in a number of ways. One, when you're scared. So normally when you're scared, what happens? You can even tell that your heart is pumping faster, right? That's your sympathetics. So you can boop, 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 all right? So you should know, even an exam, you know what happens when I'm scared? When I'm scared, it's sympathetics that come in. So what you feel when you're scared is sympathetics. So if you're blank, just start thinking, what happens when I'm scared? Okay, my heart beats faster. Yes, increase heart rate. That's sympathetics. Okay, so the sympathetics will increase your heart rate. Okay, they'll increase your heart rate. So let me say the heart and the peripheral, the CVS in short, CVS, cardiovascular system. They will increase your heart rate. So this is the sympathetics, this is the para. Okay, the sympathetics, the heart rate will go up. Okay, now just before we talk about the cardiovascular system, we know that the BP, okay, is equal to cardiac output multiplied by total peripheral resistance, or peripheral resistance in the vessels. So cardiac output multiplied by the peripheral resistance will give you the BP. Okay, now it's at this formula that your sympathetics work on. So if you've bled, for example, you've bled too much on an accident and you've bled a lot, and the body has to maintain your BP. So what maintains your BP at that time? There are a lot of factors that will maintain your BP, but one of those factors is the sympathetics, adrenaline. So when you come to the hospital and people are trying to resuscitate somebody, you hear in your movies, Grey's Anatomy or whatever, oh, give us adrenaline, adrenaline, adrenaline. That adrenaline works like the sympathetics, because noradrenaline and adrenaline are the same class, all right? So the sympathetics will try to maintain your BP. This is how it maintains your BP. It constricts your vessels, okay? When it constricts your vessels, your peripheral resistance goes up, okay? Once your peripheral resistance goes up, then we know that the cardiac output, part of the cardiac output is made up of the stroke volume, okay? The stroke volume and the number of times that the heart is going to pump. So now it will increase the heart rate and also the strength on how the heart pumps, and eventually increase your BP. So the sympathetics will, one, increase the heart rate, two, increase the resistance in the vessels. The resistance in the vessels is increased by vasoconstriction. So there'll be vasoconstriction. Your vessels are going to constrict. Okay? When the vessels are going to constrict, they increase the BP and maintain a certain level of BP. Because at the end of the day, the BP is supposed to be kept at a certain level for the mean arterial pressure. So that your body functions to make sure that its brain is fine. And the brain works at a certain range of mean arterial pressure. So what will happen is that it needs to be maintained. The mean arterial pressure needs to be maintained. So the body has these mechanisms to maintain the mean arterial pressure so that you don't become a vegetable. Okay? So you don't become a vegetable. So in the heart and the central nervous system, the heart rate is going to increase, and the vasoconstriction, which in a nutshell will increase your total peripheral resistance. So in a nutshell, that's what will happen. The opposite is true for the parasympathetics. Okay, it will reduce your heart rate and also relax your vessels. So it will reduce the total peripheral resistance in the vessels. Okay. Now, when it comes to the skin has sweat glands. The sympathetics. Again, 40 minutes. Okay, so the skin, the sweat glands, when you have the sympathetics, when you are scared, mostly you feel clammy hands and things like that. Okay, so it provokes your sweat glands to produce a lot of sweat for the sympathetics. For the parasympathetics, the opposite. Okay. Now, for the abdomen, you have the liver. The liver is a factory of energy, so it has glycogen, which is produced there. So when you are in a in a frenzy, you are in an excited sense, you need a lot of energy. When you're about to fight, when you're about to run, you need a lot of energy. So you to convert glycogen to glucose. Okay, so glucose is the energy that you need. So that glycogen to stored in the liver is going to be glucose. Now, for the parasympathetics, the opposite true. So that glucose will be converted to glycogen. So remember, parasympathetics is the digestion and the building up. For the sympathetics is using up total. So the sympathetics will use up the store, which is glycogen, into glucose, but the sympathetics will build up the store, glucose into glycogen. That's what happens to the liver. When it comes to this, to the bowels, all right, the sympathetics will cause, relaxation of the bowel, and so that there's no peristalsis, okay? So that there's no peristalsis. But for the parasympathetics, they'll promote peristalsis. So it's a digestive part of the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic. So because it's the digestive part, it will promote peristalsis. However, the sympathetics is an anti-digestive part of the nervous system, so it will close up that peristalsis that will happen. Then that is for the stomach and a lot of other issues. Then we talk about the adrenal glands. For the adrenal glands, the sympathetics, activate the production of adrenaline in the medulla of the adrenal glands. And then opposite is true for the parasympathetic. They inhibit that production. And then adrenaline works. Remember what I said? Noradrenaline and adrenaline have the same effects. So once more adrenaline comes in, the effects of the sympathetics are accentuated. So they are like inside it. And then what other thing in the abdomen? If you're shallow, you look them up. Homework. The genitourinary system, the sympathetics will relax the bladder. So when you are running and scared, it's not time to start peeing. All right. So what will happen is that the sympathetics say, you know what, dude, I'm scared, I'm running, it's not time for me to pee. So you find that even when you are feeling like you need to pee, all of a sudden you can't feel that because the sympathetics have taken over. They've relaxed your bladder and they've closed off the sphincters. So the sympathetics will close off the sphincter and relax the bladder. Only when you relax now and chill like, that's when now you calm down, the sympathetics go down, and your bladder constricts again and open. Then you feel like, oh, I actually wanted to pee. That's that time. So that's what happens. So sympathetics, they're anti-pee part of the nervous system, so they will relax. Repeat on the effects on the abdomen. Well, the effects on the abdomen, there are a lot. There was on the liver, there was on the bowel. I don't know which one. Be specific. Which part of the abdomen did you want me to talk about? So that's the genitourinary system. Okay, so it will, for the sympathetics, it will close off your sphincter and relax your bladder. But for the parasympathetics, it will constrict your bladder and open up your sphincters. That's both your anal sphincters and your urinary sphincters. The lecture is done for this one. Thank you. All right, so we were supposed to have another lecture. Let me just have a discussion with your class reps, then we see.
Thank you, Doc.
All right. Do you have any questions? Oh, on the liver. So on the liver, we said the liver is, it stores energy through glycogen, right? Now, the sympathetics want to use up that energy. So to convert the glycogen to glucose, because the energy used is glucose. So to convert it from glycogen to glucose. Now, it's a take-up part of the nervous system. So it takes up what you were building. The parasympathetics is a build-up part of the nervous system. So it builds more. So the parasympathetics will build more glycogen stores for the rainy day. The sympathetics is like you're in a rainy day and you need all the energy. So to get the glycogen, which is in the liver, take it into glucose and use it up. But for the parasympathetics, it's going to make more glycogen for a day that you'll be scared or otherwise. So that's what it does on the liver. So just go through the handout, and I think some information will be there. And for the sake of the test, For the highlighted parts of the handouts, it's a must that you know those highlighted parts. Multiple choice questions mostly come from there. That's how I prepare my multiple choice questions. And reading the handout might be sufficient, but if you don't understand, it's also advisable to go beyond and check. But it's pretty straightforward, so I don't expect you to have struggles in there. Why do people? That's your homework. Why do people urinate? Due to fear. That's your homework. You need to come in the exam. Okay. So, can I end it? I'm gonna end it.